However, that would be nothing without the fast-paced gameplay. This is what solidifies it as my favourite. The gameplay of Painkiller is awesome. I think that's the best way to describe it. A lot of people just ignore the first things, and that's why I wanted to get them sorted out first, like talk about the first parts of Painkiller, because nobody talks about the visuals and that lot. I mean, a few people do, but most people talk about the gameplay, and we're quite right. They quite rightly can, because the gameplay is amazing, despite its simplicity. And I did a blog post recently. I mean, this might be uploaded quite a while afterwards, but I'm recording this right after I did my blog post, which is video games don't need to be perfect. And in doing that, I mentioned, the important things in video games are the little things. Painkiller is no exception. It is the little things that make the gameplay so great. The way that the game is designed through its intricacies, that's what makes Painkiller solid. And those intricacies are, elements like bunny hopping, that you find in a lot of first-person shooters, but no other first-person shooter does it quite as satisfying as Painkiller. In Painkiller, bunny hopping is like the most important mechanic in the game. It's all about bunny hopping. If you're not bunny hopping in Painkiller, you're doing it wrong. Now, I can understand if you're playing Hell Wars or the PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360 versions of Hell and Damnation. It's very hard to do, but that's what Painkiller is really all about. I mean, you can play it without bunny hopping, and it's, sometimes encouraged when you're using the stake gun if you're not very good. Like, there's nothing more satisfying, though, than bunny hopping with the stake gun and getting lots and lots of kills with the stake gun when bunny hopping. If you can do that, and you can do that effectively, and you can time it perfectly each time, then, props to you for that already. Because, there's just nothing, more difficult than having to use the stake gun in itself, but when you actually have to move very quickly at the same time with the stake gun and shoot with it at the same time, it's not that easy. I mean, the best thing to do is to just normally strafe with it, side by side, and that lot, and that's usually what you'll do with it if you're not, if you're terrible at it like me. But if you're good at Painkiller, you'll be able to bunny hop around it, and it's that skill gap that adds, that extra challenge to it, that gets more, there's two different types of gamers, and I might actually do something about this here, but the gamers who like a challenge, or like mastery in video games, they will love Painkiller for that. Like, there's a whole separate community, and the vast majority of Painkiller players are like this. They are basically people who enjoy mastery, and if you enjoy mastery, you will love Painkiller. If you want a game that is going to be going to have a lot of things to master, like easy to get into, hard to master, Painkiller is the game for you. It is. I cannot stress it enough, because the stake gun is a difficult weapon to master, but it's very easy to use. It's straightforward, and one of the things that really makes the gameplay of Painkiller fast-paced is the simple fact that all the weapons pretty much insta-gib. Like, all the regular enemies are weak and have, no health, and you can just kill them in one hit with the weapon. That's not actually a thing. They have plenty of health, but the weapons are so powerful in this game that they will just kill anything in one hit. So they just come at you, they die. They just come at you, they die. That's basically how it works. But you just have to have the quick reaction timing to do it, because Painkiller has a habit of overwhelming you. It does. If I did the Let's Play, when I did the Let's Play, I did a level called Leningrad. That is exactly what I mean by overwhelming. That level is, without a doubt, and I'm talking, Leningrad is a level in the expansion of Painkiller, and really, that counts as it. I love the expansion just as much, which is Battle Out of Hell. Leningrad is an amazing level because it sums up Painkiller in a nutshell, and it really gives the ultimate Painkiller challenge, as it forces you to, unleash everything on the enemies. Yes, your weapons are very destructive, but so are the enemies, and you have to kill them quickly, and it feels so intense. The tension is there on that level. It really is. And that is one of the great things about Painkiller. Yeah, it's simple. Yeah, you are incredibly powerful, but they put you into situations, they put so many enemies on the screen that it's intense. you're constantly weaving through enemies, trying to avoid those attacks at that last minute. That means, like, like enemies about to melee attack you. You have to, like, do a quick turn and bunny hop out of the way and dodge it. This is a game where you are literally dodging bullets. I'm serious, and sometimes that's easier said than done, like, especially on Leningrad, where the enemies do have hit scan weapons, and on that level it's basically a case of shoot first, ask questions later. You have to kill those enemies before they kill you. It is possible to dodge them, but very difficult because, you have to, watch their animations very carefully, and it's very difficult to watch each individual animation. When they put their gun up, they instantly shoot you. That's literally how it works, so you have to respond to that and dodge before they do, and you have to kill them quick. Fortunately, you have the arsenal of weapons capable enough to do it. Unfortunately, there are tons of them, all at once, with hit scan weapons. Yeah, let that sink in for a minute. If you want a challenge in Painkiller, that's the level you go to. I challenge anyone who plays Painkiller to beat that level on trauma without tarot cards. Have fun doing that, because that is going to be something very difficult. I remember watching someone actually try that on YouTube. Like, there was actually a YouTube video of someone actually doing that, and they cut the footage halfway in. That doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, in the Let's Play I did, I played through Leningrad on Nightmare and did it without tarot cards, and that was hard enough. Doing it on trauma, I don't even want to think of doing it on trauma, because you don't even get souls on trauma. It'd basically just be a quick loading. Oh, you can't even quick load on trauma, I forgot. Yeah, that is... I don't even know how that's even possible without tarot cards. And yes, you are supposed to have every tarot card on trauma, and that's one thing I'm going to get to next up, is the tarot cards. The tarot cards are another thing that I love about Painkiller, simply because it adds experimentation to the game. And, like, if you, like, and why am I still asking this? But yeah, in my playthrough, I use certain tarot card combinations that work really well. For example, on Lab, you have to use the bolt gun on Lab to, and only the bolt gun. You can't use any other weapon. And, you get plenty of ammo, but there is this one section which requires you to shoot a lot of enemies, where a lot of enemies pour in waves. Now, if you don't use tarot cards there, you'll probably be really low on ammo. However, what I did is I used the combination of magic gun and I think it was haste, if I can recall. I think it was, but I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, oh no, it was, this is what it was. I used time bonus, I think, yeah, time bonus, dexterity, and magic gun. Now, I have the bolt gun, which has a secondary function known as the heater. Now, just imagine me spamming the heater, like, over and over and over again with those two tarot cards activated. Yeah, just imagine that for a minute. Dexterity, in case you're wondering, increases the fire rate of your weapon, like, it doubles it. And magic gun gives you infinite ammo. Now, if you've played Painkiller, you know that the heater is an absolutely devastating weapon that consumes a lot of ammo. What happens when you combine those tarot cards with it is you get literally fireworks on the screen. Fireworks, deadly, deadly fireworks, just blowing everything up. There's no other game that manages to do that as effectively as Painkiller, and Painkiller does it through its tarot cards. I mean, you could see that tarot cards are like a helping hand and like a cheap way to get through the level. I mean, you'll probably need them on trauma, but at the same time, they are so fun to use. They are so fun to experiment with. I mean, there's so many different tarot cards and they all do different things, especially when you get into Battle Out of Hell, where you unlock some really unique tarot cards and lots of interesting combinations. I mean, a lot of people stick to straightforward combinations in the original Painkiller. I mean, I think it's all like, everyone goes with Iron Will, Rage, and I think it's time bonus or something like that, like time bonus or, yeah, it's the third card that people usually change. But yeah, usually those are just a staple as to what people go for, but you can try so many different combinations if you want. You can really, there's just so many ways to play Painkiller. As well as that, there's also silver cards. Silver cards basically give you perks that most first-person shooters these days pretty much give you right off the bat, like regenerating health. There's literally a tarot card in Battle Out of Hell which gives you regenerating health. Well, to a certain degree, it's balanced, more balanced than any other first-person shooter is these days. But yeah, that's I personally think that there's better tarot cards out there, and a lot of people do. But regenerating health, just think about that for a second. Think about that and take it all in. Isn't that an amazing tarot card, like, to have in a game like Painkiller where you don't have regenerating health? And I want to get to that point later on, but just imagine having that. That's going to be a bit of an advantage, isn't it? It is. And you can unlock tarot cards like this, which make your life easier, but, at the same time, you can experiment with them and do all kinds of crazy nonsense. And it's fun to do this, especially in a game like this, because it's all-out action, and that's what makes Painkiller so great. Now, the next thing I want to mention as well that a lot of first-person shooters have is reloading. I hate reloading in first-person shooters. It's just pointless from a game design perspective. And I know why they do it. And this is why I do these videos. Because I talk about wine. I might as well skip this topic and skip this an entire video and just discuss this why on this. Why do people put reloadable weapons in video games? And the answer is very simple, and that's why I'm not going to do a separate thing on it, because it's a simple answer. Why do they do this? Simple. Realism. Realism in video games is pointless. Developers, stop doing it. I mean, yeah, sure, making video games believable is important and stuff, but realism... Video games don't need realism. Video games are not real life. If it doesn't add anything to the gameplay, or it just makes the gameplay, more tedious, then just stop it. Just don't include elements that just don't add anything to the experience. Just focus on what works and what makes the game more fun. Just like what Painkiller does. And that is another reason why I love Painkiller, because every single element is to this game's advantage. This game is very well designed from a game design perspective. I mean, I watched, if you watch the directors, not directors, but if you watch the developers video in the Black Edition, they mention that Painkiller, and this brings me back to another article that I wrote, which was called What a Ripoff, which was talking about games ripping off games and how that's not a bad thing. Painkiller is just that. It is a ripoff of Serious Sam, Quake, and all other first-person shooters. It doesn't strive to try anything to be different from the norm. It strives to perfect it, and that is exactly what it does, because every element is very well thought out in Painkiller. Very well thought out. I could do an entire episode on it, and that's what I'm going to do, It's like, why did they, make the first-person shooting elements, so fast-paced? Because the pacing and the fast pacing keeps players engaged. That is the reason why. That's why it's so fast paced. Because you don't have time to question whether you want to keep playing or not. You just do it because there's constant tension and you're just constantly engaged. That's why Painkiller works, and that's why they made it the way that they did. That's why they made it so fast paced. That's why they have bunny hopping. That's why they have levels like Leningrad, because it keeps the player engaged, and that is the goal of all form of game design. And how does it keep players engaged? Because you're constantly bombarded with enemies, and you don't have time to think, let alone decide whether you want to keep playing this game or not. You are too busy shooting everything, and before you know it, the game's already over, because you have been constantly playing this game, not knowing that, hang on a minute, this is midnight, I have to stop playing, get up in the morning for work, you don't, you just get sucked into the gameplay. And a lot of people argue that Painkiller gets repetitive, but couldn't that argument be made for all first-person shooters? Because all you're doing is shooting things. That goes for every first-person shooter, that's the core mechanic, and Painkiller just focuses on the core mechanic. Repetitive or not, that is what it is, and it does it so well that you just don't care, you're too busy killing things, and that is what Painkiller is all about. Anyways, let's talk about the weapons in Painkiller. You know, without the weapons, I don't think that we'd have a first-person shooter to begin with. So, you know, Painkiller has what I like to call an exotic assortment of weapons. And exotic is literally the perfect word to describe this entire game, but the weapons especially, because the weapon you start off with is literally a pinwheel, which is attached to a laser, which is attached to what seems to be a gun, and it's basically just like a blender gun. And it's simply called the Painkiller. That's what it's called. And if you press the left mouse button, the blender will spin around. This basically is basically like the chainsaw from Doom in the sense, when it does this, in the sense that you basically use it as a melee weapon, but it's not like the chainsaw in the sense that, you know, it's not as powerful as the chainsaw, but it's basically a weaker, more balanced version of the chainsaw that you can use up close and personal to shred enemies to bits. I don't really end up using it that much, but sometimes it can be useful. But as I say, melee weapons in first-person shooters don't usually mix. However, that's what makes the Painkiller so great. It's not a melee weapon, and it has infinite ammo. That is why it is the greatest melee weapon in Painkiller, because it's not, well, the greatest melee weapon in first-person shooters, because it's not a melee weapon. It's a long-range weapon that you can constantly... Think Link's claw shot for a second from Legend of Zelda. That is exactly what the Painkiller is. You launch it, you know, by pressing the right mouse button, and it launches, instead of being on like a chain, it's kind of like a grapple that you launch at enemies, but there's a laser in between that, and the laser kills enemies as well that are in it. So if you shoot what people call the warhead of the Painkiller, it's basically an insta-give. Like, on most enemies it's an insta-give, like most weapons. Which makes this weapon so good, because you know, most melee weapons like the knife in Serious Sam, does anybody use the knife in Serious Sam besides the first level? And I'm going to compare this to Serious Sam because it's its main contender. You know, no you don't. Nobody does. You're busy using other weapons, but you'll always find some use of the Painkiller throughout the game, because it's so powerful, so versatile, and so useful. The only reason why you use the other weapons is because they're more effective in certain ways. But if all else fails, just use the Painkiller. It always works for every situation, and you never feel handicapped without it. You know, you still feel strong with just the Painkiller, with just the main, you know, regular primary weapon that you start off with, and it's, you know, got infinite ammo, so you can just constantly keep using it and conserve ammo, which can make certain sections a lot easier later on when you're low on ammo. For example, you know, you just launch it at one enemy, it comes back, launch it at another enemy, it comes back. The problem with this though is that, you know, it takes time to launch it and bring it back. You know, whereas most weapons like the shotgun, for example, my god, the shotgun, you know, the shotgun fires very quickly. Like, what other video game has a shotgun that fires so quickly, like, as quickly as Painkiller's shotgun? Shotguns in video games usually, you know, have a very, very small fire rate. Like, I mean, some of them don't, but, like, Painkiller just nails the shotgun. It is perfected. Like, certain shotguns in video games have too quick a fire rate, certain shotguns in video games have too slow a fire rate. Painkiller's shotgun has the perfect fire rate. You shoot it, you shoot it, you shoot it, you shoot it, you shoot it. That's literally how, like, the way I said that, you know, that is literally how it goes. It's like, bam, 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 bam. That's literally how quick the shotgun shoots in Painkiller. It's not bam 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 like, you know, for example, the SMG, but it's very quick. Whereas most shotguns are like bam, bam, bam. You know, that's what most shotguns are like. Not Painkiller's shotgun. That shotgun has an incredible fire rate. So, and it needs to have an incredible fire rate because you are overwhelmed with enemies and you constantly need to shoot them quickly. And this is a design element that Serious Sam did wrong, did poorly. And it's the simple fact that they made the shotgun take so long to use and to fire. Like, it literally has that, bam, 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 sort of thing to it. That spacious, like, space of time before you can shoot it again, that most first-person shooters have. And it doesn't work with the style of gameplay it's going for, because it just takes too long. And as such, the shotgun becomes pointless later on, because, you're just overwhelmed with enemies, and you end up just sticking to what I stuck to, is like the rocket launcher, the grenade launcher, and eventually just the chain gun, the laser gun, and the cannon. That's literally all I did in Serious Sam, because those are the only weapons that are worth a damn later on. I mean, the Tommy gun as well, but I think the chain gun uses the same ammo as the Tommy gun. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's the problem with Serious Sam. It has too many weapons that are just completely useless. Whereas Painkiller, every weapon is useful in different situations. And you just constantly use, swapping between weapons, and you never feel handicapped when you have no ammo for a certain weapon. Every weapon makes you feel powerful, and that is what I love about Painkiller's weapons. Next up, I want to talk about another standout feature of Painkiller that a few other first-person shooters have, and that is the battle music. Now, I'm not really what you would consider a metalhead, but I like a bit of metal music every now and again, and Painkiller, my god, Painkiller's soundtrack is just perfect. It is the perfect soundtrack to accompany a first-person shooter. It is just 100% metal. That is all it is. And you are basically just shooting hordes of enemies to, like, tons of awesome metal music, and it synchronizes perfectly with the pacing of the gameplay. That, it just adds to that gripping feeling that the game has. It just makes the game even more, engaging. So, a lot of people think that music is just like a novelty in video games. It's not. Music plays a big part in game design. A lot of people could say it plays a psychological part in game design because, it gets you pumped. It gives you that adrenaline, which you need for a game like this. And that's what gets you engaged. Remember, the big thing about games, the biggest goal in games is engagement. If you don't get engagement in video games, you're not doing it right. And Painkiller does a very good job at getting players engaged, believe me. Anyways, yeah. Metal music. I can talk about some of my favourites, like Factory. I love that song. Like, that song is incredible. Like, especially considering Factory is like the first level in the game that really gets serious with the enemy numbers. Like, so many enemies in that level. It is insane. Like, before that level, they throw quite a few enemies at you, but they kind of like build it up slowly to get you into the game. It's a lot of people, like, there's a YouTuber called GG Man Lives. He did a review of Painkiller, and he said that the progression, like the actual difficulty curve of Painkiller, is terrible. Now, I disagree with him. I think he's a solid reviewer, by the way, but I disagree with him on that one, because the first level in Painkiller is just you versus a group of melee enemies. Now, I would kind of understand if you played on Nightmare difficulty, as Prison is very hard. It's kind of like a difficulty spike. But that level is only unlocked on Nightmare difficulty. You can't play it on Insomnia. Or on Insomnia. And with that said, the progression is solid. You start off with basic melee. Then you get introduced to basic ranged enemies. Like, the second level, has these little hooded guys that throw axes at you. And those axes aren't really thrown often, but you have to keep an eye out for them. They usually throw them and then they die, and that's it. A bit like a bee when it stings you. Like, if it stings you, it's dead. So it's kind of like a last resort thing that they will do, but you still have to be mindful of that. And, it slowly gets you into it. The next level afterwards throws you into explosive enemies, and enemies that throw projectile weapons more often, but those projectile weapons are very easy to dodge. And the next level kind of throws everything in it together. which is Cathedral. That throws everything in it together, and you know, tests your skill, you know, your reaction skill, and how you react to different types of enemies at once, which all have different types of style. Like you have enemies which have staffs which slow you down if you're next to the staffs, because it's got like an area of effect aura which can slow you down and it's deadly. But this staff, like on the second level, it slows you down, but on Cathedral it damages you as well. Well, I don't even actually think it slows you down, it just damages you, so it's pretty lethal, and you want to avoid that. And as such, you want to use long range weapons like the stake gun on those enemies, because you know, you don't want to use the shotgun because you'll be too close to them. And there's a lot of enemies throughout Painkiller that are like that. But then you go on to the next level, which is a boss fight. And the boss fights in Painkiller, they're probably what I like to call hit or miss. And I think GG Man Lives was right with this one. You know, I might actually link to him on the site, unless I actually put this on YouTube, because he does a lot of first-person shooter reviews. He's a pretty solid reviewer of first-person shooters. But yeah,